Have you ever felt that sudden, icy drop in your stomach the exact second you see their name pop up? You're hurriedly typing a reply, but they've already scrolled past you, opened your read confirmation, and then silence. It's not just rude, it's a psychological torture tactic. Research suggests that seeing seen without a response triggers a primal sense of rejection and imbalance, creating a power vacuum where the ghoster inevitably holds the upper hand. It leaves you trapped on your phone, frantically analyzing every past text, wondering where you went wrong. This isn't just a lack of courtesy, it's a digital hostile takeover. You wake up to a digital void, erased like a glitch in reality, leaving you spiraling into self-doubt. But before you spiral, we must decode if this is a technical failure or a deliberate exit strategy. Is it a dead drop, a lazy text that signifies impulsive and messy emotional immaturity? That's usually just bad habit. Is it a strategic shadow, a methodical retreat to avoid conflict? Or are they truly gone? These aren't just system crashes. They are people actively choosing to disconnect to protect themselves. Once we decode that, you finally realize it wasn't a glitch in the system, but a clear message about their capacity for connection. Imagine being in a locked shark cage when the doors close. That's often how an avoidant brain perceives sudden closeness. Ghosting isn't a calculated cruelty. It's a primitive neurobiological alarm. When affection gets too real, their instinctual flight response hijacks their logic, causing a severe case of psychological vertigo. Their reptilian brain screams that intimacy is an immediate threat to their safety, so they silence you just to escape the perceived danger. Basically, they don't push you away because they don't care, but because they treat a warm text like a physical threat, triggering a full-body panic response that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their fragile system. Imagine a dismissive avoidant as someone guarding a fortress with impenetrable iron walls. Genuine intimacy feels less like romance and more like a dangerous invasion. When a relationship gets deep, the threat of vulnerability triggers a panic button, so they weaponize distance to maintain control. By ghosting, they aren't actually rejecting you. They are actively devaluing you in their own minds to protect their fragile independence. It's a heavy self-defense mechanism born from a fear of engulfment, compelling them to mentally push you away to prove they don't need anyone. Ironically, while they retreat into their shell convinced they made the smart choice, they often destroy the very freedom they claimed they were fighting for. That sudden silence is rarely about you being unlovable. It is classic flight before fight in action. We have a terrifyingly fragile tolerance for emotional discomfort, and ghosting is often just emotional incompetence, masking itself as strength. Instead of signaling lost interest, it reveals a fundamental inability to regulate honesty. Think of ghosting like a toddler hiding under a blanket to make a scary noise go away. You might feel the silence, but they haven't actually dealt with the problem. It exposes a cowardice in emotional literacy, proving that for them, elimination is infinitely easier than resolution. Truly, their silence says nothing about your worth, except that they simply lack the maturity to handle it. Think of ghosting less like a final goodbye, and more like a dash through a buffet line. You get a crumb here and there, random texts that don't lead anywhere, or a vague promise to hang out, but the moment someone better comes along, they vanish without a trace. This is breadcrumbing, that toxic cycle, where someone feeds your ego with just enough attention to keep you hooked, but never enough to sign a contract. It's a tool of emotional laziness. They aren't shy, they're selfish, protecting their options just long enough to find a real connection. But don't worry, you aren't crying over a ghost. You're just dodging bad business. Next, we're going to uncover exactly why this happens. Ever catch yourself staring at a blank chat screen, refreshing Instagram, hoping for a notification that never comes, feeling like a wired addict waiting for their morning fix? That silent vibration isn't just habit, it's a biological panic. Your brain evolved to hunt for connection, desperately craving those micro moments of validation that used to send dopamine flooding through your system. Now, faced with a sudden void, it goes into overdrive, frantically swiping and peeking to fish for any sign of life. We chase silence because we are starving for the finality and closure that was stolen from us, leaving us trapped in the tragic loop of waiting for a ghost to move. You've got to look at the timeline to see what's really happening. If that guy ghosted you after a one-off coffee date, frankly, that's just a lack of basic etiquette. But if your best friend of 5 years vanishes into thin air, that's deep-seated avoidance rooted in anxiety or an inability to process conflict. Think of it like driving a car without lights into thick fog. Sometimes people just hit the brakes because the scenery got boring. Other times they ghost because they are too cowardly to press the gas forward and finish what they started. We need to stop romanticizing that silence and realize it's a litmus test for character. Is this a runner or simply checking out of your life completely? You are likely replaying every text like a detective, trying to solve a crime you didn't commit. Convinced the silence is proof of your failure. But the psychology of avoidance says this isn't about you. It's about their ability to hold space. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, intimacy often feels like physical danger, so they retreat to safety rather than face the heat. Imagine standing in the street and a car loses its brakes. It crashes, not because you attracted the driver's bad brakes, but because the vehicle itself is structurally unbalanced. Their inability to offer closure reveals a massive gap in emotional maturity, not a tiny deficit in your sparkle. They didn't reject a masterpiece. They just retreated because they managed to convince themselves that a relationship was a dangerous burden. That sudden silence on your phone feels like waiting for rain in a drought, a psychological bruise that tricks you into believing you are somehow undeserving. But let's look at the hard truth. Silence isn't deep communication. It's simply an emotional avoidance strategy, where the person lacks the maturity to process conflict. When they ghost, they aren't rejecting your worth. They are exposing their own cowardice and inability to face the world. To protect your peace, you must forcefully rewrite this ending. Don't leave their silence hanging in the air. Perform a literal digital detox by deleting the reminders and muting the notifications, washing away the digital residue that forces your brain to replay conversations on a loop. You aren't chasing someone who disappeared. You're literally picking up the slack they couldn't handle. Treat their ghosting as the ultimate compliment, that you were a giant they couldn't compete with. So, now that you've secured your peace, how exactly does that lingering anxiety actually manifest in your body? Think of ghosting not as a personal rejection, but as a flashing neon sign screaming that you just dodged a bullet. It really isn't just rudeness. It's a profound red flag announcing that the person lacks the emotional maturity to handle a connection. Psychology tells us this is often rooted in deep avoidant attachment. They use silence as a weapon to control you, proving they view people as disposable rather than human. You haven't lost a partner. You've simply escaped months of potentially toxic breadcrumbing agony. This awkward goodbye functions as your saving grace, giving you the foresight to spot their inability to commit before you gave them your heart. So look in the mirror and smile. You found out their ugly side now before you were truly locked in. The better person is out there waiting to actually show up. Imagine pouring your heart into a connection only to have the silence scream louder than any rejection ever could, leaving you staring at a blank screen in the dark. But let's hit the rewind button immediately, because ghosting is arguably the lazy, ineffective version of breaking up. It happens when someone's emotional toolkit is empty, lacking the psychological muscle to handle the messy, gritty work of communication. Research suggests this is often tied to avoidance coping. They aren't built for the discomfort of vulnerability. Ultimately, that abrupt vanishing act is a neon sign warning you about their lack of maturity, not your worth. So stop questioning your spark and realize their inability to close a complex cycle says everything about their capacity for empathy. Instead, leave them on read and find someone actually ready to play the full game with you.